All right, everyone. Well, with the American election just around the corner, we decided that we're going to start our running commentary on what's going on there. So it's only about 11 months?
300 days, something like that?
Something like
6
that.
days, 42 hours.
Almost there. We have some extremely interesting things going on and also some extremely boring things going on south of the border.
I would put it more in fascinating, hypnotically fascinating, and then just disturbing.
We did actually watch the most recent Republican debate last night out of a sense of masochism. And I definitely puked in my mouth a couple of times.
I sincerely started to feel claustrophobic by the end of it. Where I wanted to leave the room and just go for like a walk around the block or something.
It made me visibly uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, it was not pleasant, and I did not come out of it knowing who, if I had to vote for one of them, who I would support.
Hey, so fun fact, if you played a drinking game where every time the Republicans said radical Islamic extremism and took a shot every time, you would get alcohol poisoning and probably die.
Or keeping America safe.
Oh, that's another one, yeah. It looked like a pissing contest of who could be more against the Islamic State and pro-America safety. It was very tiresome.
Tiresome. Wow, that is a polite way of putting it. Tiresome. Yes, it was It was awful. All right, it was almost unbearable.
It was basically unwatchable.
And the idea that they're going to have more of those.
Jesus.
That this has not even really, really seriously begun yet.
Fuck. Well, interestingly, I mean, there's 16 people running for the Republicans, and on the other side,
I guess.
there's
I don't know.
3 people running for the Democratic nomination, so they couldn't possibly be more different.
Wow.
The thing that I think unites both of them is that you have kind of not quite breakaway factions, but definitely discontent within both parties. Like you have people on the Republican side, a lot of them supporting Donald Trump, the maverick. Oh wait, no, that was John McCain for you. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting them all mixed up.
Ha ha ha!
But
they're so hard. Well, then I mean, it's not just their slogans that make them hard to mix up. The way they dress, the way they talk, the way they just generally look.
Yes, and on the other side, you have the Bernie Sanders campaign, which is, I think, really interesting. I think it really indicates a lot of discontent within left-wing voters and progressive voters in the United States about just really being fed up with the Democratic Party and fed up with, I think, the last 8 years of underwhelming governance by the Obama administration. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but I wish their elections took around a month or two instead of a year or two.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm sure this
a year
podcast
or two.
will
I like that. I like that. A year or two. Like that's actually we're actually pretending that the election started sometime around now. It's been going on. I don't even know when it starts anymore. It's kind of just.
It starts when the votes are in for the last election.
It starts before then, though, because then you have people talking about who the next candidate will be.
Well, yeah, no, I remember seeing on the news after Barack Obama was reelected, the very first thing the news commentator said after confirming that Obama was president again was, who's going to be running in 2016?
And also, there's just so many of them. I mean, there was Trump. There was...
You said you were quite fond of Trump, didn't you?
Okay. That is slander, sir, and I will have none of it. No, Trump was my least favorite person, but, it really just comes down to whoever I remember hearing last at a certain point.
Yeah.
But what I will say is, considering the way all the other candidates talked, I understand why Trump is as popular as he is now, more than before. I get it. I get, that he is... a rude jackass and all that sort of stuff, and he is at least interesting in that way. Even though he doesn't say anything much different, he just sort of is a lot more abrasive and obnoxious and in some cases even just obtuse.
Personally, I think that Donald Trump is like the last 20 years of right-wing talk radio and extremely right-wing broadcasting. That has all gained a critical mass and has accumulated in Donald Trump and his success.
I guess so.
You know, he is the embodiment of right-wing talk radio in the United States.
But I mean, sure, you got your Limbaughs and all that kind of flabby, inflated
Drug addicts.
drug addicts. Sure, well, Trump doesn't do drugs. I read his biography. He doesn't do any kind of drugs at all.
Oh, yeah, Merry Christmas. I got him that
yeah,
for Christmas.
yeah. You bought me a bloody one of his books about how to fix America keeping America safe again
America
or some
again.
bollocks. But
Which he totally made up himself. By the way, he did not take that phrase from anyone else.
It is an original. It is an original theft on his part. That is the creative spark that man has. He is the first person to steal a good idea. No, I read his book, and you can talk about how he kind of represents this kind of weird, I don't know, talk radio thing. He's like this almost golem brought to life by the Republican Party, and now they can't stop him.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Yeah,
sure. There's all of that, but I do think that within the Republican Party, I do think there's more of a I want to say reasoning, but that gives them a bit too much credit. But I'll say that there's a reasoning behind why people are supporting him beyond simply him being like this amalgam of their own selves, in a sense. I think that there is a dissatisfaction, as you said, in the Republican Party, and I think that that dissatisfaction in the Democratic Party as well. But that, I mean, as you sort of alluded to, that the state of these two races, although they are wildly different, is down to the same problem. Mm-hmm. In a sense, that the Republicans are unhappy basically with anyone in politics. They don't like politics very much.
Unless it's themselves.
Well, even themselves they don't particularly like very much. Because more than anything else, Republicans don't like losers, and they're a party that has been losing more often than not.
That's a good point.
So they have a lot of self-hate. There's a lot of dissatisfaction. There's a lot of distrust of politics as usual. So every one of these politicians, you've got governors from 3 or 4 states on that stage who were all talking like they were political outsiders. Every single one of them was like, I'm not going to be like those Washington fat cats. I work in Washington all the time, and I know exactly how to fix it. Like that kind of thing. And it's just that over and over and over again. And then you have Trump, who is, I would say, of all these people, a legitimately outside figure who could, in principle at least, win the presidency.
That is a terrifying thing to say, mostly because it's true. He is not
like the other candidates, and that's what I mean when I said that I thought he was. I kind of get it to some extent. Like, he isn't much of a politician. I don't know how that would play out if he were to actually become president. I expect he would probably find himself so out of his depth that he would just become a political nobody again, like everybody else in Washington. They go into that meat grinder and they all get turned into sausage.
Yeah,
that would probably happen to him.
Yeah, that's typically how it works.
Yeah, but I mean, the problem is he seems to think that his ability in business will directly translate into political decision making.
Hey, well, he's got so much money, he's doing something right.
Yeah,
right?
he talks about
right?
He talks about like making treaties or argue or like the give and take of potential wars as just a series of like contract negotiations, just like when he tries to build a building or whatever. When there are, there was a bit where there's like talk about how what would you be willing to go to war over? And he sort of treats that as kind of this thing that he doesn't seem to expect would actually happen. That he can just threaten other countries in the Middle East, for instance, to do what's best for America.
Right.
And that will work. And that the problem is that the president has been too weak to do that.
Yeah. No, his lack of understanding of it is bewilders me and terrifies me. But the thing that gives me a little bit of solace is that it is becoming increasingly mathematically improbable that the Republicans could even win the presidency at all anymore.
Yeah, that is the big issue, isn't it?
Well, sure. I mean, it's especially if they end up losing Texas, which might not happen this next election, but is probably destined to happen in the next decade.
It's where things have been going, and the problem is that I mean, we talk about the media's sort of obsession with the election, and a lot of it is this false sense of urgency and alarm and crisis. Like we don't know what's going to happen. It's on a razor's edge. Who could possibly tell? And the last like 4 elections have been, I mean, basically all the elections since Bush and Gore have been fairly clearly defined ahead of time.
Well, if there's
So-
no contest and it's pretty clear that there's someone's going to win ahead of time,
And it's
then
been getting worse, though. I mean, it's been getting
But
more and
why
more
would
well entrenched, well ahead of time.
in terms of the media reporting on it in a sensationalist way, I agree with you, but I can't blame them for it because if
They
if
wouldn't
they
have
were
much
like,
else to
oh
talk
yeah,
about."
the Democrats are going to win, so there's
Yeah, but
nothing to,
I mean,
you
there's
guys
angles
can,
to this. I mean, there are like if the Republicans can't win Florida, the odds that they will take the presidency is extremely low. Now that's not it's not like that's a story that ends the debate. It's just that you have to do this, and it doesn't look like they're going to be able to do it, which means that they have to win a whole bunch of other states, and they never have in recent times, and they probably won't, given the quality of the candidates they're putting forward. I mean, the most, I don't know, the best case scenario for the Republicans doesn't really exist at all now. There is, like, unlike the last one with what's his name, Mitt Romney, right? He was the best case scenario for the Republican Party.
right. He was the most electable.
Yeah, and it was seen in the party as like, well, he might lose, he might not get the candidacy, and that was where a lot of the stuff was sort of going around, even though that was itself kind of one of those things where it was just as unlikely as anything else. Like, it was clear that he would win because he was the only one with money, and he was the only one with consistent support anywhere, or everywhere, really.
Well, that sounds a bit familiar.
Yes, well, this is the thing, is that upsets do happen, right? But, like, realistically, that was never part of the media's story about the Republican race last time. It was not, Mitt Romney is probably going to win regardless of everyone else's efforts. It was, oh, Mitt Romney didn't win in this one state, and he didn't win over here, and this happened, and this person has now a couple of votes. And who knows, that might give them the fuel to carry them all the way to the presidency somehow. Like Santorum's going to be president. Or Newt Gingrich.
Even you talking about this, I find repugnant, and I understand why so many Americans don't want to pay attention to politics at all because of this just stupid way that it's reported on and approached.
It's crap. It's so much crap, and it's so annoying because it's it's not like, in a basic sense, the media doesn't really have like the newspapers, news media doesn't have the resources to actually go out and find stories. So they don't have like the ability to fill up the news day without this kind of stuff constantly there to prop them up.
In between mass shootings.
Well, even mass shootings have kind of become like that, where you can kind of just rely on it. You know that you will have effective quality airtime, and you don't actually have to have reporters in the field. You can just fly them out when an event happens that's worth flying someone out to. And everything else is kind of just getting fed to you through AP and a bunch of other people. And with all those resources, you can kind of cobble together something approximating a news day.
Yeah.
And the American election cycle is excellent for that, because all it takes is a single idiotic tweet or like a vaguely threatening turn of phrase, and you can easily make that into something akin to news.
What I found really, maybe not surprising, but noticeable during the Republican debate was the amount to which fear plays in American politics. And just the fact that the whole time they were just talking about radical Islamists that want to kill you and your family, and beware, we need to bomb them,
There was this, what was it,
when they cheered for World War III.
well, that was funny too.
I wouldn't, funny is not what I would, yeah. Anyway.
No, it was. I'll say this. It was funny because not very many people cheered. There was like a decided minority of people who were cheering.
I'm still convinced that they were cheering for Chris Christie and not World War III explicitly.
They were cheering his turn of phrase, I guess, like that he's criticizing his opponent for wanting World War III. Are you seriously suggesting that is the mood of that theater?
Well, I think they were Chris Christie partisans that were just they said Chris Christie's name and they were like, woo, yeah.
Well,
but maybe you're right. Maybe they were.
I don't know. I've heard.
relishing
I mean,
the
it's not.
destruction of
It's
the human
hardly.
species.
It's hardly the worst thing they would have cheered for, ever. I mean, after all, America always wins world wars, so what's the problem? But no, look. I thought it was just strange how in the whole debate that they just didn't seem to be able to. I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound stupid. They didn't directly answer any questions, and I don't mean like they weren't straight shooters or any of that kind of bollocks. I just mean that no matter how softball the question was, no matter how simple, no matter how easy,
Yes or no?
well, not even just yes or no. It's like questions like, would you help our allies kind of questions, or, would you save a child in a burning building, or would you sit there picking your nose kind of questions. And it was always this long, rambling nonsense where they were constantly going over time. It just seemed like none of them could just say, like, you know what, I'm going to do the right thing.
Well, no,
Done.
I think no, but it's on purpose though. They give these very emotionally charged, generalized sort of answers that where people that are listening to them get the gist of what they're saying.
But are people listening to this? Because those answers were not at all emotionally charging to me.
No, when I say emotionally charged, I mean like instead of stating specific facts and things and policies or direct answers to the questions, you don't ever have to directly answer a question. You just have to give the feeling that you're on the same side as the person listening to it. And so you can you can give an answer that's general enough and wordy enough that it can be interpreted in maybe 10 or 12 different ways depending on who's listening to it. And so it's a way, I think, where they can. I think that is their way of strategically dodging questions so they won't actually be held to account for specific things that they said. They give more general, wordy, convoluted answers where if somebody calls them out on it a few months down the road, they can say, oh, no, I meant this because of it. So I think the more that they avoid direct statements altogether, the better it is for them as a sort of insurance policy.
I don't know. Wouldn't brevity be useful at all in this?
Well, no, because you want more airtime. Also,
but you don't.
You want to run out the clock so that you can have more, time on stage.
But not a lot of. While lots of people generally are watching these things, most people are going to get the sound bites from the media later on. In the days following these debates, that's what they're going to hear about. The most interesting quotes, and I'd hate to be the person whose job it is to have to sift through this stuff to find those, because it's hard work. I don't understand how. We didn't actually look up what the media response was to this debate, but I'm sure there was plenty of the usual sort of so and so said this important thing and blah blah blah, and most of that stuff it just went right by me. I didn't really get anything out of this debate that would have been worth. I didn't feel like there was anything said in this debate that would have been worth reporting on the next day.
Well, I can't remember the former CEO of HP, the woman. I can't remember her name.
The woman.
If I were a news media outlet, I would have been reporting on how she was a basically overt fascist that wants to create a warrior class of American citizens and I
didn't even know what the hell that was even going on about, but I thought it was funny that every time a question was asked, her solution was the private sector.
Yes.
No matter how simple the question once again was, on foreign policy issues, how do we work
private sector?
How do we work better with our allies? Well, we need to bring the private sector into this discussion. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah, no, she was one of the most fascist candidates.
Well, she was. I mean, look, taking her words at face value, she was in fact describing a corporate state.
Yes,
but I mean that was literally what she was doing. I don't think that any of that stuff was really on her mind at all, as far as yes, corporatism, fascism, that kind of stuff. It was more just, Everybody likes private business. Everybody hates the government. I'll just say these words. And I'm from business, which my campaign manager probably told me you want to rest on because you
Right.
don't have political experience. So talk a lot about your business experience.
No, I'm sure that's the case, but at the end of the day, both of those roads
It
lead
was
to the
pretty
same
funny.
destination.
It was pretty bizarre. But I still, once again, I don't think that was worth reporting on because that's so esoteric and odd compared to the usual sort of political stuff. Like no one's seriously looking at what these people said in this debate and dissecting their political views on the basis of like the implied philosophies that would justify their thinking.
Yeah.
And to be perfectly honest, we're probably wrong, is the problem. I don't even think she considers it all that important, like the reasoning behind her reasoning.
Right, you think it's mostly just
It's,
fodder.
it's ad hoc and
Yeah.
sort of intuitive
Yes.
types of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, well, of course, I've worked in the private sector. Everyone knows how great HP is. I'm using an HP computer right now. It's better than it hasn't like burst into flames or anything. That's pretty good. That's the private sector for you. Very rarely will electronic devices actually immolate you.
Unless it's cheaper to pay the lawsuits than it is.
Well, sure. I mean, just go on a sidetrack here. You heard about the whole thing with GM, right? Apparently, they had like hundreds of people die because they didn't want to spend 90 cents. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that rule of thumb doesn't always hold true. Sometimes they'll let people die even if it was cheaper.
Wow.
Yeah. In any event, so yeah, I mean, she was interesting. I can't remember her name, but to be fair, I can't remember basically anyone's name other than Trump, Christie, and Jeb Bush, Rand Paul too. I thought Ted Cruz was okay. For the most part, he was
Define okay.
okay. He seemed like the only person on that stage who actually wanted to be there most of the time. Well, him and Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio was a bit better, I think.
He was actually a decent politician.
Yeah, no, that's true. Ted Cruz, I think, he seemed like the person who actually didn't have anywhere else to be. I guess was the thing. Like, this is my best chance for a future is being here.
Man, what I
He had the eye of the tiger.
what I found notable was the level, just the general level of political discourse and discussion during the Republican debate, where at times it felt like they were a group of 8th graders that were dressed up like adults in thrift store suits on stage, like acting as though they were adult politicians. The level of discussion was so basic and infantile and just dense that it was like, I can't even believe that these people are contenders to run the most powerful country in the history of the world. It's a little bit unnerving.
Yeah, it does. I mean, look, I know this isn't how it works, but there is sort of this general idea that the people who are running for president are like the best citizens of America. However they got there, but like that's in some way, these are exemplars of what America has to offer. These are the kind of people. If I heard the kind of words they were saying from someone at a bus stop, I would like slowly but politely just move away. These are the kind of ramblings that in any other environment would be treated as some kind of serious disorder of some sort.
Yes.
Or they're just, poorly socialized human beings.
Yeah, I really couldn't believe it.
There's a general disinterest in human life, the total non sequiturs, constantly coming back to the things that they actually want to talk about, like for no good reason.
Yeah.
Like, well, you asked me about this one topic, but I'm going to talk about this other thing I've been talking about the whole night.
Oh, let me mention the legislation that I put forward recently.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'll take credit for that. Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, that kind of thing. If you were actually talking to someone who talked like that in a coffee shop, you'd just think that they were a sociopath. Like every time I try to talk to him, he just talks about himself and how great he is. It's a bit unnerving. But yeah, so that's the Republican candidates, a bunch of sociopaths talking about things they don't understand, and Donald Trump, who talked about things he didn't understand, but did it in a way that I think was a lot more honest. That he was like the one sociopath in the room who realized that The Republican sociopath mindset isn't working, so we need to be a different kind of sociopath.
And on the other end, in the Democratic debates, there's a very similar and very different trend going on, where you have this very obvious upsurge of support for the Sanders campaign. Sanders being a self-described socialist.
Yes, well,
he isn't technically, but
Well,
I'm
there's a lot of
willing
things
to
he
give
said that
him
were-
that just because I think that his candidacy and his popularity is a positive sign in American political consciousness.
He says he's a socialist, and you say, let's give him that for just the technical sake. And you say, well, he's not technically in the lead, but let's pretend like he is because he says he's a socialist.
Well, okay, I'll be the first to admit that diehard Sanders supporters are willing to ignore polls and statistics just because they like him.
It's just
so
Ron
much.
Paul all over again, as far as I'm concerned.
The fuck are you talking about?
It is. It's Ron Paul again, but on the Democratic side. It's the same kind of like, this is going to change everything and not politics as usual. And he can totally win, everybody. The media doesn't like him, but he's got all this amazing support. Money's flowing in from donors.
Well, what I do think is definitely true is that the Democratic Party, as I'm sure you would agree with me, is purposefully stifling his campaign because he is, anti-establishment, as it were.
Yeah, sure. But who isn't? Who isn't? I mean, you saw the Republican debate. They were all anti-establishment. They loved it.
Well, okay. Well, Donald.
So
Trump,
is Hillary
Donald
Clinton.
Trump, yes. Piss off.
Oh, well, she
Hillary.
says so. I mean, if we're going by
I'm
the
not
words
talking
of people,
about who says they're anti-establishment. If you asked anyone running for president, are you pro-establishment or not, every single one of them would say no. What I'm saying is that Bernie Sanders does actually represent a threat to the Democratic Party apparatus.
well, I don't think he does.
Oh,
No, I think. Look, I do think it's great that he's there. I do think it's important that like he's mentioning sort of certain ideas and is trying to steer the general discourse towards the left a bit. That's all wonderful and helpful and delightful. I don't think, even if he were to get the nomination, that he would really be a serious threat to the Democratic Party's apparatus.
you think he'd just go into the sausage machine just like Obama did?
Maybe, but more than that, I mean, the Democratic Party itself is not the government, and so he doesn't have the power, even if he was running for president, to really impact the Democratic Party all that much.
Okay, but be that as it may, the Democratic Party apparatus is trying to work against him because they
think he's
feel-
unelectable, for one thing.
Well, okay, A, they're wrong. B, I think it's coming from more of
Probably.
a. I mean, the Democratic Party apparatus wants Hillary Clinton to win.
Yes,
She is their golden girl.
And they will
right?
they will fulfill that promise of Sanders' unelectability if they have to.
Yeah, right. But here's the thing. I mean, it's been shown that the more airtime that Hillary Clinton gets, the less popular she is. Mm-hmm. And alternatively, the more airtime that Sanders gets, the more popular he becomes. And so since the Democratic Party wants Hillary Clinton to win, what they've ended up doing is having as few debates as possible, and the few debates that they do have, they put them on Saturday nights and at the same time as popular football games. Apparently people watch that. And
You pompous ass.
and they're going out of their way to limit the amount of exposure that Bernie Sanders has for fear that he might actually win the nomination, which is improbable. But possible.
I think there's two sides to this. One is I think one of the reasons I think it's more true on the negative side, as far as they don't want the debates to really be as public and big, because as far as it goes, it appears that Hillary Clinton will almost certainly win the nomination, and so therefore nothing good can happen from the kind of aggressive back and forthing.
That just brings up more
Issues we don't want to have to deal with. Now, that's like, even if Bernie Sanders was the most boring man on earth, it would. I think the reasoning would still hold true in that case.
Right.
Like, even if he didn't call himself a socialist, it would
So-
still just be like, well, look, we have this person who's clearly well in the lead. Let's not undermine that
So you think
by
it's-
having her talk a lot.
So you think it's less to do with anti-Bernie sentiment and more pro-Hillary?
Yeah, I think it is. I think that the Democratic Party feels, the Democratic Party leadership feels that she just deserves to win, and if people can deserve to win, she certainly is a candidate for that.
What I have to say, as much as I would love to see a female president at some point, Hillary Clinton is astonishingly disingenuous and out of touch with working class people. Her campaign has been so. I don't.
It's
even-
awful, all right? It hasn't been great. But once again, I think that a lot of this has to do... I mean, we're talking about campaigning now. I do think still a lot of this has to do with the fact that the Democratic Party wants to have a united front, a clearly decided on candidate, and they don't want Hillary Clinton to be going around and doing anything useful until that has been assured. You know, and I assume once she's the Democratic nomination, which I predict will happen, then she'll start saying all the nice things again to select groups of people, as she always does, as Democratic candidates generally have done, where, you know, it depends on who they're talking to, that they'll say all sorts of pleasant things to one group and not to another.
I'm not sure if Hillary Clinton is entirely electable, though, because while she has all the connections, she has all of the resources, she's got all the money, she has all the experience.
She's just not a very good politician, is the problem. Hillary Clinton is just, like, for all that I would say, like, from the standpoint of, like, a bureaucrat, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean, like, as an administrator, apparently she does a very good job in, like, government roles where she's been appointed and that kind of thing. But as far as actually being likable and politics and ideas and sort of communicating those ideas to people, she's never been good at that at all. And it's not really her fault or anything. It's just that's just the state of things. And I think that has been one of the major reasons why Clinton's had such a hard time getting the nomination, even now. It's just a sort of this unlikable person who people, I think, somewhat rightly see as self-entitled, and that this is more of a coronation than an election for her.
Yeah, I think the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton both kind of feel the same way. You know, to them it's just like the right to, you know, that's just the way things go. You know, you have all these connections, and
The problem
so you
is
just get the nomination.
The problem is that is generally the way things go.
It is, and that's why they think that way,
Yes.
right? And
they're usually correct. And
and
Bernie
the fact
Sanders
is
has
that-
come along and tried to mess up the whole thing. And this is the point I think is worth making very clearly, is that I think there's a difference between saying it's a good thing that Bernie Sanders is there, and that and then also sort of tacking onto that the idea that Bernie Sanders has in fact changed that dynamic. He has not. He has not changed the power relations in the Democratic Party at all. He's fighting against them, but even if he wins the nomination, he won't have defeated them at all.
What I think is funny is that when Obama broke the record for the amount of small donations during a political campaign, they all celebrated and said what a great thing it was, and the Democratic Party celebrated and said it was awesome. And then when Bernie Sanders breaks Obama's record, nary a peep from them, because they want to stifle his campaign as much as possible. So they really don't give a shit about democracy at all.
Well, this is not about... Well, I mean, look, there's no reason for them to be happy about something that makes them unhappy. That's just silly. The fact that they don't want to talk about Bernie Sanders has to do with the fact they don't like him at all, and think that he's unelectable, and think that his ideas are crazy, and that he's too old and too white and too male, and, you know, all the rest of it, and therefore just, you know, we have Hillary Clinton. She's got the money, she's got the power, she's got the connections.
Okay.
She's interesting.
Okay,
to some degree.
she isn't. But okay, do you honestly think that the ideas that a Bernie Sanders campaign would put forward would be less popular than the ideas that the Hillary Clinton campaign
No,
would
in
put
fact, I
forward?
do think on a purely, like, if we were to just treat these candidates in a vacuum, I do think Bernie Sanders is more electable than Hillary Clinton. I think he has a less likely chance of actually being elected, though, and the reason has more to do with the Democratic Party. That I
Less
don't.
to do with his ideas.
Yeah, I think that they would scuttle his campaign.
So you think the chief reason why Bernie Sanders couldn't win is because of the party he's running for?
Yes,
Yeah, I don't disagree.
that's what I'm saying. But so yeah, I do think, I do think that of you know, if we were to see the Trump-Clinton race, which is where the numbers are sort of vaguely pointing to right now.
A year in advance.
Yeah,
yes.
sure. That I think that Trump has a much better chance of winning against Hillary Clinton than he does against Bernie Sanders.
No, I think so too. And the reason why the Democratic Party is against the Sanders campaign is because while he's a socialist, he's not technically one, but he still seems very passionate and genuine about wanting to be an adversary to corporate America. And the Democratic Party is fully in the pockets of corporate America just as much as the Republicans are. And so the fact that Sanders giving a sort of, soft left social democratic kind of a campaign.
I wouldn't even say social democratic, to be honest.
Well, yeah, I mean, the American political spectrum is
That's fine.
Vastly rightwards of everywhere else.
Well,
so he can call himself a socialist and still get away with it in America. But nevertheless, the fact that he has these, what Americans would consider very left-wing policies, and wants to take on corporate America, break up the banks, increase taxes on the rich, all this stuff, and is very open and openly adversarial. The fact that the Democratic Party, which is ostensibly the party of the left in the United States, start to stifle his campaign says way more about the Democratic Party itself than it says about Bernie Sanders.
Yes, but what exactly is that doing for the people who are drawing those conclusions? Because if you're talking about this campaign as exposing the hypocrisy and dishonesty of the Democratic Party, I agree, it does that. But on its own, it's not good enough. We don't need heroes to lead us to electoral victory in the states. We need our own organizations, our own parties, and we don't have that. That's the problem. And so long as Bernie Sanders is not actually going to that point, this all ends up just coming back down to, well, you're going to have to vote Democratic anyway. Even if Bernie Sanders loses, you're going to have to vote for Hillary Clinton, because you don't want Trump to win, do you?
Right.
Done. We're done. We're already finished. It's over. The whole idea that this is going anywhere or building towards anything, it finishes at that point.
Well, Bernie Sanders, up until this point, has been an independent senator. He hasn't been a part of the Democratic Party. I believe that he saw the Democratic nomination as the best opportunity for the left in America to advance its position and to gain visibility. So even if he does not win the nomination, that he's still succeeded in that, right? But I think more importantly, the best case scenario, I don't think it's likely, but that sort of mass movement of people that want change could very well find its roots in this campaign, where Bernie Sanders is using the visibility that he gets from this campaign to bring attention to these ideas. And he's building his own sort of his campaign apparatus, a movement of people, an organization that, best case scenario, could tomorrow or the day after be the sort of kernel, the seed of the mass movement of people that do want socialism in the United States.
Well, okay, but my main point is that it's not the Democratic Party that needs to be fixed. It's organizations independent of those parties that need to be created and developed.
There does need to be a Labor Party in the United States.
That's my point. And if based on the sort of quote socialism unquote that he's talking about, the FDR, I'm the FDR kind of socialist, as he said. I don't think that that's where this is going to lead, because it appears to me at least that when push comes to shove, he will probably endorse Hillary Clinton after he loses.
Do you think so?
I think so. I think that's what will happen. And not that that'll be a bad thing. Not that like he'll say like Hillary Clinton's great. It'll be just like what most people will say, that all we have are these two parties, and given that, this is what you need to do.
So you think that...
And it'll just fall right back into the old way of doing things. So you think
that Sanders would have been better off just running as an independent this whole time?
I don't know, really. I think for visibility, this is great. This is fantastic. But it's visible for what, right? Like, you got to go beyond simply the kind of propagandistic value to a lot of this stuff. Like when we're talking about things like Occupy or whatever.
I was just gonna say Occupy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like,
it brings visibility to
this whole visibility thing is great and helpful, but without a core of ideas and without some organization that can sort of sustain itself through victories or defeats, it'll evaporate again. And that's the problem I have with Bernie Sanders, is that he has yet to really be moving in that direction at all, and he doesn't even seem to have much of an interest in that kind of organization or building of a movement in any sense. That his whole idea seems to be much more diffuse. It's just bringing people together and socialism and left wingers, we come together, help me in my campaign, and we can maybe blast through those doors and we can finally get into power. If that succeeds, I think it'll end up with a lot of people who will be completely disappointed with his presidency. If even if he were to ever get that far.
Yeah, well, just as many people were very dissatisfied with Obama after all the hope that he was peddling.
This is another good example. You got these millions of people who are involved in politics for the first time, not just giving money, but organizing events, going door to door, all that kind of stuff. There's this mass of people who are invested in this movement for the first time. And once he becomes president, once success is achieved, what happens to those people? They just go away. You don't have anything to do anymore. We've won. You can go home. The war's over. And then the business of government just carries on. And I think that's what would probably happen if Bernie Sanders won. Although once again, I don't think he has a very good chance of winning either the nomination or the presidency.
I still think he's more electable.
Yeah, maybe I'm contradicting myself in a sense here, but I think he is a better candidate than Clinton. But I think that given the party he is trying to run inside of, I don't think they would help him at all. I think they'd rather. Considering that they don't have an incumbent, this is a perfect time to lose. You put in a nut job who can't possibly get 2 terms, and then you'll be back in 4 years.
You know what I would love to see instead of the usual 2-horse race? I would love to see Bernie Sanders running an independent campaign after not getting the nomination for the Democratic Party.
Yeah,
and then Trump running an independent campaign, so you'd have 4 people. That would be awesome.
It'd be interesting to see.
It would be a shit show because, how would they even count the votes?
Well, yeah. How would they even count the votes?
Electoral college, does that even apply anymore?
Yeah, it does. It's a stupid process, but they do have contingencies for all of these hypothetical things, like 3 candidates running,
or 4.
Or 4. It is interesting. I mean, you've got even now we've got Clinton, Sanders, Trump, and Bush. And any one of them has I think a decent amount of chance of winning the candidacy for their parties. And I don't think it. I guess what is it, a conflict of interest to say that I have money actually riding on this?
Well, I was actually just going to ask you why you would include Bush as one of the front runners if he's so low in the polls, other than the fact that you have $10 riding on this.
10 whole Canadian dollars, which in another year's time might be worth almost nothing, riding on the idea that it'll be a Clinton-Bush race. Why? Because that was the race that hurt my soul the most. That idea.
And it's also they are the most
It seemed the most likely.
Yeah,
and it was the most institutional, and it seemed like the most depressing scenario to me.
I think it would probably give the conspiracy theorists heyday.
Trump is more frightening. Don't get me wrong.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
But if I'm talking about the things that would make me unhappy.
10 years ago, if you would have said that such and such is more frightening than Bush, I would have said, get out of town.
Trump loves to make comparisons, like every Republican loves to make comparisons between himself and Reagan.
Yes.
Loves to. They all love Reagan. But I do think there's a relevant comparison to make here, in that Reagan was similarly not a politician initially. He was just he was an actor, sort of famous guy, celebrity type, who was able to become president basically on the basis of that. And then from there, that sort of disassociation from politics allowed him to be crazy enough and weird enough that conservatives have loved him ever since. Maybe that's what will happen with Trump. He'll be the next Reagan. 30 years from now, people will be talking about how amazing he was.
And in the wreckage of the nuclear holocaust that would inevitably ensue with his presidency,
well, that's what people said about.
We'll wipe the dust away and see a poster of Trump 2016.
That's what people said about Reagan.
That's what people said about Reagan.
Wreckage. Don't get me wrong. When the Democratic Party was making fun of Reagan, it was he's insane and we'll all be dead if he becomes president, kind of stuff. And that's not true. He learned what his job was pretty quickly. There's millions of people in the American political system that help the president every single day of his life, so he doesn't actually have to ever make a decision he doesn't want to.
Okay, so how about if it's Sanders versus Trump? Who wins?
Oh, we all win. That would be great. It would be fun. I don't know.
I'm
because
calling it for Sanders on Sanders versus Trump.
maybe. I'd probably lean more towards Sanders, but the only reason is because I think one of Trump's most powerful assets is his willingness to insult and embarrass the people he's debating against.
Right.
And I don't think that kind of tactic would really work with Sanders at all.
No.
Like it's one of those things where I think he would completely misjudge the like how thin-skinned he is, basically, like how willing he'd be to backpedal on his own words, kind of stuff, and
Right.
and then Trump would probably just have not much else to go with. Like he's basically just a one trick debater.
However, on the other hand, if the actual nominations end up and the polls suggest this, 300 days in advance, Clinton versus Trump,
Ooh,
I think that Trump would probably destroy her.
it's possible. I think
All he would have to say is...
it would depend on the debates, definitely. It would be. I think it would be one of the few campaigns where it could reasonably be decided in the debates. The problem, of course, for the Republicans is, once again, they are fighting an uphill battle. They have to do really well to win, to have a chance of winning. And I think Trump is a crazy enough guy that he has a chance of demolishing her in a debate.
Oh, no, I think that he would absolutely demolish Clinton in a debate.
Maybe.
Well, because she is so disingenuous and two-faced. And, one day she says she's standing up for working
Yeah.
Americans, and the next day she goes to a corporate hedge fund meeting, right? All Trump would have to say is, tell me about that donation you got from Citigroup or the Bank of America yesterday. Yeah, you really support working families, huh? Are you going to take these corporate donations? All he would have to do is expose her blatant hypocrisy, and he would appear to be more trustworthy than her.
Yeah, but this is the thing: is I think that it could work. And this is what I'm saying is that he's got a chance. I still kind of on the edge here for the two of them. Maybe an outside chance for Trump. I think he's a better candidate against Clinton than any of the other Republican candidates are. But realistically, I think the odds are he'll say something. He's just as likely to say something that would hurt himself.
Well, he will inevitably. Although he did make fun of a disabled person and had no noticeable backlash. So
Well, he also said a lot of things about Mexicans as well. No noticeable backlash there, at least not within his own party.
no, if anything, he got more support within the Republican Party for slagging off Mexicans.
Well, because he's a straight shooter, strong candidate, et cetera, et cetera.
Fucking Christ.
He also wants to build a wall, both along Mexico's borders and Canada.
Hey,
mind
you gotta keep out the Canadian jihadists now.
Oh, what
For
exactly
fuck's sake.
does he think that? Firstly, there's no way in hell they're going to build a wall that long. They can't even build roads that long.
I think it speaks volumes about the American social consciousness when they're talking about Canada being this strange foreign land where evildoers come in from because they're weaker than us.
It's almost heartening to think that they are as jingoistic towards another predominantly white country as they are to Mexico. It's like, you know what? Maybe it isn't about race. Maybe they just hate everyone.
that isn't American.
Yeah, it isn't American.
Well, they were saying that the 9/11 hijackers came in from Canada and that.
Well, yeah, that's an old can that gets kicked around every so often. They also just generally talk about that it's an unsecured border just in general, and therefore a terrorist who wanted to attack America could, in theory, go to Canada, because our security is presumably, as far as they're concerned, weaker, and then they could just walk across the border. And in many cases, you wouldn't really be screened or checked or asked much of anything at all.
Yes, but this is so very hypothetical.
Well, it's not just hypothetical. It's also kind of vague and pointless because, the border is so fucking massive. I don't think they quite understand how easy it is to get across the border if you don't actually have, if you don't care to follow the law. That there are huge sections of it that are just public parks and things.
And
it's not hard.
And on
you
the
can
other
go.
hand,
You can go. If you've got like a boat, if you're in the fucking the Great Lakes or on the West Coast here, there's plenty of small ports and towns, and you can pretty much just dock your boat up and just walk into town, and you're now in America.
well, it's also on the other hand,
It's not hard, and the problem is that to fix that problem, quote unquote,
you'd have to change geography.
you have to change geography. You also have to just change the laws entirely, and no one wants to do that, either in Canada or America, because of all the money that would be lost from trade. And also, while they talk about Canadians, I think that the sort of people they'd be asking for passports would not simply be anyone who looks Canadian.
You or I, for example.
For example.
Yeah.
But it always comes back down to the old, swatches.
Racial profiling.
Yeah.
Well, on the other hand, what's interesting about Donald Trump's I'm going to build the best wall, it's going to be a great wall, it's going to be the best wall anyone's ever seen, this wall is great, I'm good at building walls claim, is that there are great swaths of the Mexican border that you can't really build on because it's just sand.
There's way. I mean, you could. At the end of the day, a wall has to be maintained. This would require patrols. Money would have to be spent. Obviously, Trump doesn't particularly care how much that money would be, and given the American budget, it probably wouldn't be a substantial amount of their overall costs.
Well, the irony too is that,
of course, it just wouldn't really work. But
the irony is that Trump or any number of the other Republican candidates that are lambasting immigration claim to be, Republicans and right-wingers generally claim to be great people with the economy. We're better at balancing the budget. We're more economically responsible, blah, blah, blah. But immigration actually benefits communities on an economic level. The fact that you would end up spending tens of or hundreds of millions of dollars on building and maintaining this fucking wall to keep out immigrants that add to the economy and create value is profoundly economically stupid. And the fact of the matter is that America and Canada are countries that are founded on immigrants and need high levels of immigration to sustain themselves and survive. So the fact that they're spitting on immigrants is shooting themselves in the foot.
But those people break the law, Ben.
They're rapists. They're drug dealers.
Illegal immigration. Are you suggesting that America not follow its own laws, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes.
Yeah, well, sure. That's fine.
That's exactly what I'm suggesting.
Yes. This kind of comes down to the question, and I'm always hesitant to ascribe hypocrisy to anyone who has an interest at heart. But there does come a point where I have to be wondering, given all of that, given sort of the facts surrounding much of these questions about immigrants and refugees and so forth, it does eventually boil down to the only consistent factor being race. At some point, like that, there is just this. Well, they're Mexicans or they're Syrians, so don't let them in.
They're Islamists coming through Canada.
Oh God, that's the other one, or sort of religious stuff. I was actually surprised to some degree how little religion was mentioned in that debate.
They didn't even say the word abortion once.
Well, it was mostly on foreign policy, international
yeah.
issues kind of debate. And while I'm sure if there's anyone who can do it, a Republican can make abortion a foreign policy issue. They decided to err on the side of consistency and just talk about Islam for the whole hour and a half or whatever it was.
What I would love to make a list of countries that you should or shouldn't support in the Middle East, and watch the Republican.
Yeah, it was funny. It was funny.
That.
It was funny how watching them trying to, because they were all trying to get one up on each other. So every time someone would mention a country we should be helping to defeat ISIS, someone else would be like, well, actually they're helping Iran. Syria and Iran are allies, and Iran's our enemy because they hate Israel, and Israel's our ally. And, because they're helping us, obviously not with regards to ISIS, but in kind of more of an abstract general sense that they're America's ally. In addition, America's ally is also Syria, or, not Syria, but the Free Syrian Army, who doesn't exist to some extent, and then Saudi Arabia, except Saudi Arabia has been killing people and is fighting a proxy war against Iran and Yemen, but they're also assisting sometimes ISIS, but also they're also assisting ISIS to fight Syria, and Syria is a bad guy because, Assad's a murderer.
And our ally is Iraq, except they're mostly
Iraq
controlled-
is useless, and quite a substantial portion of the Iraqi, militia is actually joined ISIS.
And the actual legitimate government that they're allied with is completely corrupt and incompetent.
And they're potentially the ones who inspired sort of this movement in the first place. They're also fighting the Kurds, but the Kurds are fighting ISIS, but they're also fighting Turkey, and Turkey's part of NATO.
And 10 years ago, the Kurds were bad because they were communists, but now they're okay because they're against ISIS.
And they have women in their military, which is great. But they're also fighting Turkey, and Turkey is our ally generally.
But they're also not because they're buying ISIS's oil.
Yeah, who's buying ISIS's oil? Oh, that just confuses the whole issue altogether.
Yes.
And every single person in that debate was like using all of these true statements as if they were like these incontrovertible final facts about the problem. Well, all we have to do is provide, X to country Y, and then the problem will be solved.
We just need to bomb the bad guys.
Yeah,
We
either
just
aid or bombs need to be going to one or more of these countries.
We just need to target the bad guys, and obviously
Yeah, it was mentioned
Obama
all the time, bad
doesn't
guys.
want to target the bad guys because he's too weak.
As if it is just a matter of weakness on the part of the president or on any particular political leader. That's the problem. Obama knows what he should be doing, and he's not doing it because he wants to make friends with all of these evil people.
Yes, he's weak. He's a bad president. He's un-American. But
Yeah.
And it's funny because like the Americans recently they've been cooperating with the PKK.
Yeah.
Actually, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, who are I think actually still on the American list of terrorists, but as a method of convenience, and
So is Iran, and they helped Iran as well. Iran, and this is the problem.
And Assad's apparently not that bad anymore.
There comes a point where it seems like America has signed alliances with every single country in the Middle East, and it seems like things have just gotten worse. The more friends they have, the more enemies they have in the Middle East.
Personally, I think the best thing that they could do is eliminate their reliance on oil and fossil fuels altogether and have a sustainable economy, or at least shoot for that.
Yeah.
And then the politics in the Middle East wouldn't really matter so much at all anymore, except as it pertains to arms contracts.
Well,
and the
sure.
military-industrial
The reason
complex.
Russia is involved in the Middle East has nothing to do with oil. They have plenty of their own. The problem is that this is about geopolitics and money, not so much about oil is important because that's a valuable commodity that can be traded almost anywhere, but that there are just strategic interests against other powerful imperialist powers, Russia primarily in the case of Syria.
Syria is a big investor in the Russian nuclear industry.
Yeah.
So
they buy their weapons. They've got, and to be fair to Russia to some extent, they don't have too many allies or sort of around the world like America does, and so they think I suppose they figured they deserve at least one in the Middle East. It's not exactly a great time to be trying to find friends. They don't get to have friends. I mean, powerful countries generally don't have friends, and at a certain point, I guess nation states just aren't friendly ever. They're political institutions.
They have interests,
that have interests,
not friends.
And sometimes those interests are basically. I think that on a certain level, nation states are kind of like a sociopath. They don't have real relationships with anyone. That there's always an interest behind everything they do, which if their interests just so happen to be friendly, then that's great. And so you got countries and nation states that act as if they were friendly. And unfortunately for us, we get taken along for the ride. And even more unfortunately, the process by which these countries sort of find leaders is completely fucking insane.
We will continue to cover the American election as time goes on. There is only a scant 300 and some days before the actual date.
Barely enough time.
Yes.